Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to our weekly Thursday webinar at 12 o'clock. The noonday gun has just gone off in our Cape Town studio, and we're really thrilled to kick off yet another insightful webinar session. I'm Neil Peterson. I'm the founder and content-in-chief of Real Estate Investor, South Africa's premier independent real estate content, education, and news platform since 2007. And at REI, we're really passionate about serving you, the South African real estate investor, the South African real estate industry, and also property business community through our online digital platform. That's rei.co.za, our monthly magazine, Real Estate Investor Magazine, and REI's virtual webinars and our in-person seminars and conferences. And today, I have the pleasure of serving as your host and moderator for our investment webinar. And thank you all for joining for this very insightful session. And today's topic is Unlocking Profit, your guide to successful Airbnb investments. And before I introduce you to our two expert BNB panelists and delve into our discussion, first some housekeeping. So I do extend a warm invitation to our faithful attendees to actively engage with us. So please do that. It's very important, your questions, so please fire away, don't be shy. It really enriches our dialogue, so please feel free to ask any questions at any stage. To do that, you just go to the Q&A box located on the bottom right-hand side of your screen, not the chat box, that's for general comments. And rest assured, we will deal with all your questions and we will address them during the Q&A panel session right at the end. Yes, there will be recordings. They will be available and accessible if you have registered for this event. And for those who have not registered, you can get them on the rei.co.za website, which is under events, which is on the home page. So let's move into the heart of today's webinar. It's called Unlocking Profit, your guide to successful Airbnb investment. So we just had a very successful Reside Summit last week in Johannesburg. It included InvestorCon, where we discussed Airbnb live and in person for 2 days. And in fact, we also discussed it at Resi Summit or RE Tech, and we had our Investor of the Year awards, where Airbnb certainly reared its head a number of times, and it's definitely on the radar of a number of investors today. And we will share some more strategies and more in-depth on this lucrative investment sector as to how you can also get involved. If you're not involved, how you can be profitable and very profitable in Airbnb. So without further ado, let me please introduce you to our esteemed guest panelist today. Our first guest panelist is Robin Booth. Robin, you can switch on your cam, and also he is also winner of the Property Investor Awards 2018. He's also a serial entrepreneur, international speaker, real estate investor and coach. And today he focuses most of his efforts on Airbnb investments. He's an award-winning speaker, as I said, shared with A-listers, and he's an expert in property business automation and financial freedom. Welcome to you, Robin. I'd like to introduce yourself to the audience.
Yeah, Neil, great to be here again. And yeah, I always enjoy our chats. I mean, we've actually gone back quite a long way, and you've been part of what I call my investment journey, and you've seen how I've gone through the kind of buy-to-let phase and the student housing phase, and then the developments, and really it's the Airbnb one which we're most interested in now, because I mean, I love the title you've given for today: Unlocking Profits, maximizing profits, increasing income, living for free. I mean, we could have so many different titles that all just that capture some or every investor's appetite for something. I mean, no matter what kind of investor you are, there's always a space for what we're chatting about today. It doesn't have to be your whole portfolio, but something on the side, or this is my primary focus, and I've done all the others, but nothing produces the kind of returns and profits that Airbnb does, with the amount of ease and actually, in many ways, the amount of education you need to get going. And that's incredible. A side note, actually, and now you've got me going already, Neil, and you haven't even asked the
Sure.
first question yet. But for example, my nephew, who is 14, is starting his own Airbnb process. Sure, he's with his dad, who's going to be the host, because of course it still has to be legal. There's a rental arrangement in place. But from that, he's learning all those fundamentals. He can still be the coordinator of messages. He can still check all the cleaning team is sorting stuff out. And he's going to be earning good cash, more than any other teen will, because this is so applicable. It's not like he has to study 5 years or 6 years to become, some degree holder of how to run a business and earn money. Literally from day one, he's going to be getting significant income. It's fantastic what this opens up. And of course, I shared with you as we got on this call, I just took over another property today, and I just walked in here an hour and a half ago. And it's there. It's because it's working, and I'm loving that we're chatting about this today. And any questions people are wanting to ask, this is the opportunity, because you've got both myself and Miguel. I'll share my secrets with you. I've shared them with so many other people who now are also generating incredible income and expanding portfolios, and as we call, firing their bosses. I mean, what a great achievement that within a fairly short period of time, a year or something, you can generate enough income on Airbnb to fire your boss without even owning property. That's one of the options, right? We can do a rent to rent, where we're renting from a landlord without even having to buy it and go to banks and get funding. You can rent a property and then list it on Airbnb, and you generate more income than your expenses, and you're in the profit. And literally from day one, it's just, there's so much that we can chat about here. So I'm amped and ready for this.
Wonderful. I think you piqued a lot of people's interest here. But I think you said something very important there, Robin. And that is the fact about education. And I think that's key. A lot of people tend to go into sort of investments like this sort of very blindly, without sort of getting any guidance. And I think that's very important. I think that's critical. Okay, great. So our next guest is great having you on the show, and we look forward to hearing more from you, Robin. So our second guest is Miguel Martins. He's an ex-banker. He's a 25-year-old, well, not 25 years old, but he's a 25-year-old investor. He's an innovator in finance solutions, advisor, independent market analyst, and he's dedicated to empowering property investors, and he's an Airbnb investor as well. So welcome to you, Miguel, and maybe introduce yourself to the audience as well, please.
Thanks, Neil. Thanks for having me here. Good to be here with Robin. Robin and I have walked quite a long journey on property investment and Airbnb. So it's great to be having this conversation between the three of us. Yeah. So as you said, my background, I spent 25 years in banking at Absa Home Loans. Well, the last 7 years was at Absa Home Loans, so I understand the home loan business. I understand mortgage finance. I left 2 years ago, and at the time, I built up a decent rental portfolio in Johannesburg. And I looked around and said, well, I need to. I've left corporate. When I wanted to really challenge myself in a new space, looked at what I had and said, hey, the property, how can I improve the yield on my rentals? And being around Robin, being around a group of Airbnb professionals, and I think I'd like to talk a little bit about the news that we did quite a bit today. Actually put myself in this space, and over the last 12, 14 months, gone from opening up, testing out with 2 to going to 10, and currently have 16 apartments or listings across Sandton, Joburg, and Cape Town. So, thought I want to kick off with is the Airbnb promise is a great brochure, and I think we underestimate that it requires investment in education and knowledge. It requires there's a bit of hard work and business thought that goes into it if you want to take it to that level. But it's super exciting, and I think there's unlimited top end if that's where you want to go. But done properly, it can be a very effective strategy. I also look after. I'm an admin on the largest Airbnb Facebook group in South Africa, Airbnb SA. So come and join on there. And I also have a WhatsApp group with just under 300 hosts in in Johannesburg. And why these groups are so important is because we share our challenges and experiences with each other, and that's how we grow our businesses and also and create opportunities. So very happy to be here and to share my knowledge with you and the audience.
Wonderful. Great having you as well, Miguel. And yeah, you mentioned that point of education, just so critical, just so important. A lot of people go into this blindly. Okay, Robin, so let's start off with you. So let's talk a little bit about, you mentioned right up front that obviously you started on buy to let and all that kind of stuff. Let's elaborate on why Airbnb has become such a popular investment strategy. I mean, Miguel, I like the way you said the brochure type thing. I mean, because there's the brochure is it's working, but let's start delving into this a little bit more. You know, what are the key benefits compared to traditional renting?
So Neil, I think that, I wish there's just a one answer, which would be so obvious to everyone. But depending on your investment strategy and what you're going for, Airbnb, as we've described it, can actually answer a whole lot of those questions. So let me start with one, which is how I started. I couldn't afford to live in the place that I wanted to live in because the rent was too high. And my story is I wanted to live on the beach. So I found a way that I could rent a 4-bedroom house on the beach, sublet just the room in front, which was self-contained. I just boarded it up so that they couldn't get into the house, soundproofed it. And that just that room on Airbnb paid for 75% of the whole house's rent. So literally, I was just paying 25% on the beach in Cape Town, which I could never have afforded to live there in that case in any way. So there I was literally living in a place which I couldn't live in before. The second one is some people might say, okay, I like the buy to rent in that I actually want to own an asset. Great. But in South Africa, you're really challenged to find cash flowing properties where your rental income is going to be more than all of your expenses, including 100% finance, plus all your rates, levies, taxes, maintenance, etc., etc. So for those who still want the traditional buying to rent out, well, if you buy to rent out an Airbnb, you're probably going to get 2 to 3 times the normal rental you would do if you just rented it to another person on a 12-month lease, which means suddenly I can purchase properties with an increased income that I could never do in a traditional buy to let. Then you've got investors who are capped out on their money expenditure. Their affordability is low because they've already got a portfolio of 3 or 4, however many they've got, and they just don't have that extra cash as a deposit or even the affordability, or from the banks, like the banks say, listen, you've maxed out your affordability. Then you could go into a rent to rent where you're renting, which means you're just putting down a deposit in the first month's rent. And if you're clever, you can rent a furnished apartment. You can get going with very little capital, but extreme rental income coming in on Airbnb. So out of all of those, it taps into every investor's kind of, as you said, it catches their eye. And I think it answers so many of those questions that's what initially makes people think, oh, it could be an answer to my next step. And once you've taken the first step, then you start expanding like Miguel has. He's tested a whole lot of stuff. He's scaling it. And I think that's also then the fourth type of investor who says, I don't just want one, I want to scale this into a business or into a whole different venture. And that's the beauty of Airbnb is because it requires so little capital as a rental arbitrage process, you can scale this quite significantly very quickly as well. I mean, Miguel has said 16 units in, a year and a half, 2 years. I've got other clients who've done the same thing, 20 units within 2 years. I mean, that's significant, and they're generating good profits. And I think that's where this is appealing to so many South Africans.
Okay, great. I think it's a good way to set the scene over there. And thanks for that, Robin. And we're going to start getting in deeper. I can see already the questions are coming in. So there's interest and there's people and it's getting momentum. So please, guys, send those questions. So I'm going to ask the same question through you to Miguel, because obviously you said you've come from nowhere. Not from nowhere, but from buy to let. You've also made the transition into Airbnb, and you said 2 units, you're up to 16, and you're doing it both in Johannesburg and in Cape Town. So maybe just elaborate what pulled you in. I mean, is it for the same reasons as Robin? Is it different or is it the same?
So I think there are a variety of reasons someone might get involved, right? Look at Airbnb as a income earning strategy. If I look at a lot of the hosts we have on our WhatsApp groups, you have hosts that have one Airbnb. It might be on their property, it might be their rental property that they've converted, or they've gone and done the rent-to-rent strategy, and they're happy with one. They have a full-time job, quite enjoying that, and they just wanted this extra income stream to supplement the income, to save towards a nice experience, kids' education, etc. But often they get a taste for it and think, yeah, I can do more than this. This actually isn't as hard or as intimidating as I expected. And usually those successful hosts who do it well, and I think we can touch on that just now. What does that mean to actually do it effectively and to do it well? They migrate to 2 or 3. And then some really kind of take it further. And with me, having left corporate, I was looking at a business, at something to get my teeth into. And having been in property all my life, as I said, I've been in rentals, I've done flips, haven't done such student accommodation, but I've been around that space, and this just seemed like an interesting space to be. It's got a exciting element of travel and being involved. So it's nice to get out to Cape Town. I'd go once a month to go and check on things. I've really, the glamour of travel has evaporated because I go down at work and I check in on the cleaning team and the DIY and all the rest. So still interesting, but it's it is work. So I think it really does tick various boxes depending what the host or the investor is looking at. So where Airbnb was born was really out of obviously we know it comes from San Francisco, but really the type of host it appealed to was someone who had a bit of extra space in their home and wanted to rent out the room. And that eventually became the garden cottage. And Airbnb is only about 10, 11 years old, 12 years old, I think. It came out in 2011, 2012. So it's a very new concept. It's a new platform. The concept of short-term rentals has been around for generations, right? We always, growing up, we always spent a week on holiday somewhere. It was usually not in a hotel or in a resort. It was in somebody's rental home for a week on the coast or in a beautiful place. So the concept of short-term rentals has been around for a long time. And then platforms like Booking.com arrived. And then Airbnb is actually one of the more recent platforms compared to those that arrived. And that just really opened it up to a much wider audience.
Okay, wonderful. So let's delve in a little bit deeper. Let's talk about locations. Now, I've heard Cape Town, heard Johannesburg, all these different, is this the place where it's all happening? In fact, we've got a question from a lady from Namibia. And she says, I'm a property practitioner and I own Airbnb in the city of Windhoek. I'm learning a lot. Well, hopefully you're going to learn a lot here for Valencia. But let's talk about location. What are the more promising locations, Robin, and what are the factors that make those locations ideal?
So I'm going to just jump in and say, for me, the ideal location is where the return is best. That's ultimately, it is a numbers-driven game for me. So that's important. And how the return is devised in some way is also going to depend on the kind of person who's looking for Airbnb. And there's a misconception that it's just for tourists, that it's just travelers who go around and do those kinds of things. And therefore people think, oh, if you're not on the beachfront in Cape Town, then, what's the point of doing Airbnb? And this is where we know that's not true. And Miguel is going to certainly give his answer on that, because he has figured out other sweet spots that deal with exactly that. And you've got, when I travel to Joburg, I stay in Airbnbs, which means, well, where am I wanting to stay? Well, where I'm needing to go, where I'm needing to work. You can take into account, for example, close by hospitals. Maybe someone is in a hospital and you've got family who are visiting who can't stay in the hospital overnight, but need to stay close enough in walking distance where they just want a place where they can crash to then go back to the hospital to visit their person who is in the hospital. And then that's actually a need. So wherever there's a need for people, then you're going to find a demand for Airbnb. Now, if we're taking that into account, I think one of the other misconceptions is well, there's so many Airbnbs out there, the supply is way more than the demand, so we're already out, we're capped out. And I think that's not true yet. We certainly have increased supply over the last years because so many investors are realizing this is a legit investment process and are jumping onto the bandwagon as such. But the beautiful thing about South Africa, in an ironic way, but from an investor, and if you hear me, just listen to me first when I say the beautiful thing about South Africa is that a lot of South Africans are lazy. And a lot of South Africans are just going to wing it. They're going to say, just because I hear great stories, I'm going to just figure it out and do it. And it takes them a while to get going. And it's not easy for them. Whereas with the right education, which you mentioned, and understanding the fundamentals, then you're going to be on top. And as we've said, it doesn't matter how much competition there is, as long as you're on top. And then that's where you get, more of the money. And I think that's the important thing. So more important than just, oh, there's only one sweet spot. There's quite a range of that. The same way as if you could say, well, there's a 1-bed or a 2-bed or a 3-bed apartment better than a house, or it's all going to vary. One of the biggest trends at the moment globally are big houses like villas where you've got 15 people staying, because if you do the maths, 15 people contributing to the rent of that Airbnb per night actually goes a long way. So there's a lot of money in that. There are people who are traveling like that. Now, in South Africa, that might not be here as much because we don't have groups of 15 just traveling around and doing things, but there is this growing awareness that different places have sweet spots, and that's beautiful for us because it means that we're not just trying to fit one size in every kind of situation, which means we can each find our niche and make it work. Like Miguel and myself are a perfect example. We have a different strategy around how we make it work. And some of that is economies of scale. And there are just so many variables that allow us then each to be able to be profitable without conflicting and competing against each other.
Okay, so Miguel, you're based in Johannesburg, and obviously the logical thing would be I'm going to start in Johannesburg. I don't know whether that's what you did. I'm not quite sure, but maybe just talk a little bit about what's worked well. What are the Airbnb strategies from this location? What are the factors that made them ideal?
Well, so yes, I started in Johannesburg. I started an Airbnb in a multi-let property that I have, which is probably less than half a kilometer from my home. And I started there, and I subsequently converted that property into a guest house, effectively a guest house of Airbnbs. And I started there because it was close by. I wanted to understand this business. I wanted to understand the guests, the requirements. I wanted to build the processes to manage it effectively, to almost let it run almost automatically. My business, as Robbins, is very automated. And to be able to understand what are the teething problems, what are the issues that I'll come up against. So I started around the corner from me. And honestly, although one can start remotely immediately, that comes with a lot of risk. So if you can, start it close by because it's around the corner. But don't ignore. So in Sandton, in Sandton, our seasonality is fairly flat. There definitely is seasonality in pockets where occupancy or demand drops off, but the seasonality is fairly flat and relatively consistent. And I can share with you the type of guests we get. Whereas in somewhere like Cape Town, the seasonality, and we're talking about the Atlantic seaboard, wherever there's a nice view, you get extreme seasonalities where in the summer months, you get not just South African tourists, but European tourists, international tourists come through, and they're comparing our rates to international rates, and South Africa is a very affordable and interesting option, attractive option for them. So we get the benefit of that over the last 3 months with the weather, as the weather becomes really not attractive in the Western Cape. That demand dries up, and there are other strategies that we employ to make it through it. So extreme seasonality, we've got to manage through that. And I've gone for so I'm applying 2 different strategies in 2 different regions, getting to understand those different seasonalities, and ensuring that I can leverage them off one another. So applying real business principles. So this is no longer a business that's done in the granny cottage outside. That's where it started. but this is a real business that one can scale using real business principles to do so.
Okay, excellent.
Just on the guests, we were talking about guests, and so let me
Yes.
give you insight of who stays. So let me give you this the typical the types of Sandton guests. Obviously, some travelers coming into Sandton or into Johannesburg rather for business. I mean that's what you'd expect, right? The guest coming to one of the Sandton Mediclinic or Morningside Mediclinic for a procedure and has to hang around. The guest left last week, had been with me for 4 months. They were from Namibia. They came to have a baby here, and they stayed until they thought the baby was strong enough to fly back. The most interesting guests are the staycation guests who come, who live probably less than 15 kilometers away and just want to spend a weekend away from the norm. I don't know what their homes look like, but they really just want to enjoy a weekend away, someone else's property that is decorated. We've got a pool, we've got it's a nice environment, and that's probably about 25% of my guests are guests who probably live less than 50 kilometers away. So it's a wide variety of guests use our properties.
Okay, excellent. All right, so let's get in a little bit more into the sort of, let's talk about strategies. Let's talk about sort of occupancy. What are the strategies and tips that you can get high occupancy rates? I see there's actually a very interesting question from Anonymous. He said, can we delve into how to run an Airbnb successfully? So it fits in very nicely with this question and what makes an Airbnb successful and how to differentiate yourself. So Robin, if you can maybe just talk a little bit about some insights on property management strategies, actionable tips or strategies to obviously achieve that high occupancy rate. And we know that obviously increasing occupancy is important for profitability. So maybe if you can share that.
The thing I love about Airbnb is it works on just fundamentals. There's no magic kind of formula that is in the air that you are lucky to get hold of or not. It's basic fundamentals. And that is that you want to make your place as attractive as possible, make it as easy as possible for the guest to enter, to enjoy, to exit. And of course, we want to capture their reviews, their comments, their remarks, because it proves that your place is legit, and social proofing encourages then more people to come in and book. And again, I'm going to touch base on the review process as well, because again, South Africans are so lazy that if you take a look at the number of reviews of most hosts in South Africa, they're very low. And the only reason for that is hosts don't ask guests for reviews. They kind of assume the guest will just ask, and they just carry on with their own business. But I ask, and I get about 19 out of 21 in bookings the way I get a positive review coming back. And that means that I'm going to stand out above my competitors because I'm going to have a lot more reviews, and it will obviously generate a lot more interest. And what's so important at the moment is credibility, that my places are legit, that it's not just a startup where someone's going to get scammed or that they're going to get hoodwinked in, sold into a beautiful picture that when they get there actually is nothing like that at all. So all that social proof is really, really important. But I'll tell you what the key is. The key to really being successful on Airbnb is managing your greed. I'm going to say that again. The key to being successful on Airbnb is managing your greed, because when you get those first bookings coming in and you realize, hang on, like those 4 nights kind of paid for my rent for this whole place. That was way too easy. I'm going to increase my nightly rate. And so they increase it. But the bookings start drying up because South Africans predominantly book on price. When they go and look around, they look at the photographs, but fundamentally, if something is 10 Rand cheaper, they'll go for the 10 Rand cheaper one, even though it's nowhere near as nice as the other one. So that's just the mindset. So if you just stay on the fundamentals and you curb your greed, and what I mean by that is, if you understand the fundamentals of the ratio of a lower occupancy, a lower nightly rate that is lower than, let's say, that your market average will have an increased occupancy rate, which when multiplied together to find out how much income will you get for that month, will have a higher income total than obviously a high nightly rate and a low occupancy. And when you get that at a fundamental level, you won't feel you're being cheated out on a lower price and people are getting a good deal because you're benefiting the end result, which is increased income for that whole month. And I have had to continuously curtail myself. Every time I open a new unit, I'm assuming I know what I'm doing and I'm going to pitch my mark here. And my place is much better than everyone else's, so it is worth more than everyone else's. But I realize that my occupancy isn't as good. And I'm not satisfied with an average occupancy. I'm looking at between 85 and 100% for the year, not just for the high season, for the year. And that is incredible. And just to put a perspective on that, Miguel, I was chatting to one of my clients yesterday, and I said, July, one of the lowest, times in Cape Town to have, Airbnbs. And I checked, and we're not even finished in July yet. So a property that I bought, I bought it for 6.2 million. And sure, we got transfer duty and I did some renovations, but just July got 110,000 Rand rental income from Airbnb. In the lowest season, probably 2 times what I would have got if I had rented that out, if I was lucky, to any other long-term tenant. I mean, that just tells me that this model works. So there's a true example. I pulled it up yesterday. So I think, that's how you make this work. Get the fundamentals. And one of those is get a professional photographer, please. For people who think, no, my cell phone takes good photographs, you're going to miss the boat. You're trying to, again, I don't want to spend 1,500 Rand on a photographer because I can do it myself. But that 1,500 Rand you do spend is going to elevate your listing, and it's going to be used for 3-4 years into the future. So those are the kind of mindsets we need to get right. And if you just do those things right, and of course, we list that, in our courses, we list all the things that you must get right. Things like, for example, try and avoid glass shelves and glass tables because they pick up dust and then it looks like you've never cleaned anything. All these little tips, even those who think, oh, my place is really fancy, I want to use high thread count Egyptian cotton linen. You know how difficult it is to make high thread count Egyptian cotton linen look ironed? We bought this 800 thread count Egyptian cotton linen, and then the guest leaves a review saying, it looked like these guys didn't iron their linen, because it's so difficult to make it absolutely, smooth. So we realized, don't do that. Go and get your 200 or 300 thread count, and that comes out very nicely. So we mention all of this in our education. Just get it right, those fundamentals right, and you'll benefit for the rest of your time.
Yeah, awesome. So just quick one. In terms of what do you think made you turn the odds around to be above average for July? I mean, was there something, maybe one thing or a couple of things that just stood out? Before I get onto you, Miguel, because
so
you beat the
yes,
odds.
that's a really good one, Neil. And I think it ties into that with the increasing supply, and in Cape Town, having a beach view is not unique. I mean, you've got so many beachfront places, buildings that all have the same views. So you've got to think, how am I going to differentiate myself from the 8 other listings in the same building who all have the same view? And that's going to be the uniqueness that you can still position. Are you going to use wallpaper, bold colors? In my latest one that I've got, we're turning this kind of this one room, which is a weird room, we're turning that into the theater room. So we're going to put a big TV with leather couches, and straight away people are going to say, oh, I definitely want to go and spend my time in that unit. It's the same size as all the other ones, but we're bringing in a difference to it so that it stands out. And I think that is what made this other one that did so well in July being chosen above a whole lot of the others, because you won't find something else similar to that in a whole suburb. And it was a risk back then, because I thought, is the market going to appreciate what I'm going to do? Or is it that, that they're going to say, no, this isn't our style? But what we found is we've started attracting the people from the Arab Emirates, from, the high net worths who come in and are like, we like your guys' style. Thank you very much. We want to experience this kind of uniqueness. And that doesn't have to happen just with these high-flying penthouse units. You just need to make yours stand out so it looks like it's an experience for someone to come. And that can be done very economically. It's not that you have to put a lot of money in. And I think my advice to anyone listening to this is look at it through that lens. What could I do that will make it stand out when someone looks at mine compared to everyone else's, to say, this looks interesting? And what we're finding in this modern generation is people are wanting something that is different. They're wanting something that excites them, that and gets their sensory expectations a bit high. And I think if you can provide for that, you're going to be already above the average out there.
Awesome. Great. I think nicely put there. Miguel, can you maybe just add on to specifically, the property management strategies that have worked well for you, and some tips, or let's, I don't like the word tips, strategies that you can get higher occupancy rates?
Sure. So, kind of building on what Robin said, if one thinks Airbnb short-term rentals is really, let's put it in place, price it, and then walk away and just let the money roll in, that will definitely work for about 10 days, maybe 2 weeks, but before you know it, it drops off. I think it's about active management. It's watching the pricing, your pricing relative to what's happening in the areas. It's not about being greedy, but it's sort of understanding, when do you want to be the last one booked? When do you want to be the first one booked? There's a whole level of pricing strategy that's required when doing so, and that'll adjust and that'll obviously influence your occupancies. And that's where the investments in education is important. Robin's got a fantastic course which I've been on, and also part of just being in groups where you can. I sit with a group of 3 other super hosts who have several Airbnbs, and we sit for 2 hours a month over a coffee, and we discuss pricing strategy. It's all we do. And we at different levels, but the same principles apply. I put Airbnb the same way as going to a shopping center, shopping mall. And if you're scrolling down that page and you've said, I'm looking for a 2-bedroom in this environment, you just go past shops until something in the one window stops you and says, "Ooh, I like that." The difference with Airbnb is that you can't go in and try it on. You got to buy before you try. But that shop window has to show you enough to say, "Oh, I like it. The quality looks good. I can trust it, and I'm going to pay for it before I arrive." The reality, but where the kind of protection for the guest comes in, is that if I do try that on and I don't like it, or you create an expectation and it wasn't met, that's the review process that is so important, and that's what we all work towards, is ensure that. And the review process is all about, what I expected, did I get? So as long as we match the guest expectations and try to exceed the guest expectations, we get good reviews. Good reviews bring more guests. So working on that and everything that leads up to that review is incredibly important.
That was a point made obviously earlier by Robin, is obviously that review process. And he said, South African owners are lazy. Yeah, I think more than lazy, probably ignorant, all that stuff you could throw around. And it's probably the most important thing. So really, some really good stuff which is coming out here. So let's talk a little bit about sort of what key indicators or metrics. I mean, are there metrics? Are there indicators that distinguish Airbnb, what is a good? Because normally if you're talking buy to let, you want to look at ROIs, cash on cash investment, all that different kind of stuff, and all the different internal rate of return. You get all these concepts that come in. But now if you start looking at Airbnb, what distinguishes that from so what are the metrics say? Is there a metric? Isn't there a metric? I mean, Robert?
So I'm going to say yes, and to all of those. There's research out there on what are good properties. I know from my own experience what they can produce as in a return. I know what from those that I work with and coach and to get education, what their returns are like. And at the end of the day, I'm wanting, what we call that free property. I want a property, if I'm buying, that all of my income covers all of my expenses, like everything from transfer duty to the bonds and the loans, through to the refurbishments, to furniture. All of that must generate greater income than whatever I've spent on it. So that means I can keep scaling. So that would be the one thing. The other thing that is useful in this is you can also do things like the rental arbitrage, where you are renting from a landlord. And if you rent it furnished, and some people say, yeah, but kind of what landlord is going to rent their place to you when they could do it themselves on Airbnb? Well, the beautiful thing is out there is that South Africans are sometimes lazy, sometimes I don't want to say ignorant, Neil. That was your word, but I'm going to say they might not have put the effort into just figuring out the fundamentals, and they like, that's it. I've done all this. I've set up this unit nicely. It's too much stress. I can't wait up for the guest who might come in at 11 o'clock at night to hand over the keys. It's too stressful. So I just want one tenant in there. And that's the perfect one for us to come in and say, well, we will be your tenant. I will be your one tenant. And thank you very much for setting this all up, because I don't have to spend anything on furniture, renovations, because you've already done it nicely. All I have to do is put down probably the 1 month deposit and start paying rent. And yes, I might need to buy my linen, buy some amenities, restock, soaps and things like that. And then literally I'm getting going, which means my income will literally pay off the deposit and the rent, which means everything after that is cash. It's cash positive. You talk about returns, they're infinite, because you can actually scale this. You can then go and do the next one with the next one. After 2 months, you could take the profits from that, go to the next apartment and do the same, which means you're just cycling this over like you can't do in traditional real estate investing if you're buying. It takes way longer and the sums are much higher. So you can really get in with very little capital, and that's where you're going to make very high returns on your money that you've put down, because actually within the first 2 months you paid back all your money to yourself and you rolling into the next one. So again, there's so many different strategies. In my case, I actually want the assets, so I'm willing to go and buy them, as well as making sure that my income covers all that. So I will also have an infinite return on those properties, including actually getting assistance to manage them while I'm traveling. That's also a thing. I mean, I see there some questions around, well, how do we create success? And we don't want another job. And so how do we, when we get to scale, how do we facilitate our expansion and growth and make sure we keep our time flexible?
Absolutely. Yeah, we'll get on to some of those questions at the end.
Right.
But I think certainly, Miguel, maybe did you want to add to the whole metrics scenario, how you handle it?
Yeah. So definitely Airbnb has a fantastic yield, as it's great returns. Sorry, let me know if I'm freezing. I see the connections.
No, you're not. You're fine. You're fine.
Okay, fantastic. So
Yeah.
look, Airbnb has great yields. The majority of my portfolio is still in rentals. I have it there. I'm quite happy with those rentals that tick over. The yields are a lot less than Airbnb. My potential to expand is a lot less, but I like having that balance. So happy to carry that on. Obviously, I'm focusing on scaling the Airbnb where the high yields are. I look at, we were talking about landlords just now. The way I see it is that an Airbnb host, the right Airbnb host, is the right partner or the right tenant for a landlord. What we focus on is ensuring that landlord's property is kept in the best condition, that we improve the decor, we replace any damaged goods. It's in our interest, because as soon as the property is not in good condition, then we start to lose our guests, we get bad ratings, etc., etc. So an Airbnb lessee or renter can actually be the best tenant for a landlord. And that's part of the education that we do. So I always look at my landlord as my partner, and I have two developers who I rent from, multiple apartments from them, and we talk as if we are partners in that space.
Okay, wonderful. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I want to get into the Q&A a bit earlier than normal. So, because I think there's a couple of good questions, and I think the way you guys have set the scene is really sort of opened up, I think, the conversation very nicely. So first of all, I see Sharon has requested the WhatsApp group number. I think she's very intrigued by those 300 people that to be on that group. So if you could also share that number, that would be great. Iqbal has asked, would you recommend a multi-listing by acquiring a channel manager? I don't know who wants to give a crack. I would assume that's a listing, right? And where do you list? Maybe talk a little bit about that. Is it the Airbnb standard? Or are you on booking.com? And, let's talk a little bit about that.
Sure. I'll chime in with that, and Miguel can after if he feels that he would like to as well. So we need to first understand what a channel is. And a channel will be different booking platforms. So Airbnb is a channel. Booking.com is a channel. Lekkerslaap is a channel. Expedia, Agoda. These are all different channels through which a guest could book short-term rental accommodations. At some point, if you're wanting to list on multiple channels, you will need a central coordination piece, which is called the channel manager. And there are loads, tens, if not hundreds of different channel managers that have different variations or different like things which you might find you're needing. But basically, they manage all the same kind of fundamentals. And that is, we want to make sure we don't have double bookings, like booked in one channel manager or one channel, and then booking.com books those same nights and you've got a conflict. So we want to try and alleviate all of that, and channel managers are excellent at that. Channel managers will allow central messaging so that you just have to go to one place so that you can then message and automate a significant amount of your messaging. Nearly all of my messaging is automated. The check-in instructions, I send videos, photographs, how to do certain things. It's all done through a channel manager. I use a channel manager to also fluctuate my pricing slightly, which just increases algorithm in those channels, so I get listed on the front page and listed first. A whole lot of tips and tricks. If someone says, how do I increase my occupancy? Well, just go and look at our research and the tricks that we use to increase the algorithms and positioning on our pages. And of course, like in my case, I also have locks, digital locks, which are Wi-Fi enabled, which my channel manager talks to and gives the lock, the code for my guest just for their stay. So it increases levels of security, and those are how I start choosing channel managers. I can even review a guest automatically without actually even writing anything. So it's all these kinds of things channel managers can do, and I'll definitely recommend you move in that direction, even if you just have 2 Airbnbs or 2 listings. The next question you said is, well, when do you start exposing yourself to different channels? And I would say when you're ready to take on more income, because the more channels you have, the more likelihood you are going to fill your gaps and get maximum occupancy. Both Booking.com and Airbnb have realized that they can't contain you like as ultimate loyalty. They know you're going to look somewhere else. This is now a big business, and they're going to use different other techniques to try and keep you in one place, but you're not going to be penalized because you've got Booking.com and Airbnb that you're supplying to, or any of the other channels out there.
Okay, excellent. Because I think you've actually answered the question for Sharon as well. She did ask, what are the best platforms to advertise on? Is it a good idea to advertise on multiple platforms? I think you've dealt with that very nicely. Miguel, I don't know whether you wanted to add to that. Is there anything on that particular one that you wanted to add to?
Just maybe 2 comments. So Booking.com is the largest booking channel in the world. But Airbnb is potentially the easiest one to work with. So I would definitely, if I was being new to the space, Airbnb is a great place to start. They provide the Airbnb air cover insurance for your guests, which Booking.com doesn't. And just the way their platform works, it's a much more user-friendly channel, well, not a channel manager, channel. Booking.com, it's like throwing a different net. You throw one net on the one side of the boat to catch those fish, and you throw another net on the other side of the boat. And and the nets work differently. Booking.com was originally built for hotels. So it's got a very different intent. Used extensively in the short-term rental space, but its features, its functionality are built slightly differently, and a lot of Airbnb hosts have a very negative experience with with Booking.com, but only because it's a slightly it has a different way of working. If you're serious about getting into the space, if you're serious about scaling, serious about driving occupancy, get to understand the tools, get to understand the platforms, and work with them. Is really my take on that.
Wonderful. Okay, nicely put as well. Graham has asked, I have a major problem with Airbnb, short-term letting operators who rely or impose on complexes to run and support their business. Large reliance on security to vet and release keys to book guests, guests arriving at all hours of the night having to be let in, noise and disruption to other residents, allowing entry to and overseeing of cleaners. No wonder many complexes are outlawing stopping this now or imposing additional fee. Comments on that? Do you want to have a crack there, Robin?
Yeah, most certainly. The one of those things I would probably most look at there, if I look at what that question is talking about, is then you have to consider if it's the wrong unit, the wrong complex. I mean, rule number one for me is if I can't automate a check-in, then I don't want to I don't want to invest in that complex or that unit at all. That's just so important from that perspective. The other one around, well, actually, let me expand. Automating the check-in means I don't have to pay someone to be there to hand over keys and show people how to get in. There are lock boxes, digital locks, ways to get remotes that people can get in. There's cell phone accessibilities. So there are lots of ways that we can prevent this control of someone saying, hey, listen, if you don't use me, you can't get into the building. No, we can actually find ways to do that. The second one they're talking about is noise and all of that. Well, there's a lot of tech now. There are gadgets that you can put on the ceiling, Airbnb approved gadgets that will monitor the noise, just not record it. They'll monitor the noise. And based on that, if it goes above a certain threshold, I will be notified as the host, and this prevents parties or disruption to my neighbors. So there's a whole range of things that we put in place to prevent all of these issues that people are complaining about. But if the actual body corporate is imposing this themselves, then you're in the wrong building.
Okay, all right. I think very good assessment there. So, Miguel, you want to answer?
Maybe just absolutely. I was offered a beautiful townhouse in Cape Town, looking onto the beach last month, and I looked at the complex and I said, "Is this a space or the type of owners?" As I spent some time there with the landlord, who was very keen to let it to me. Is this going to be an issue with neighbors? And as much as you can, put in these management tools in place that Robin referred to, and those are critical, especially in high-end apartments. You are going to have the odd, group of friends arrive, and then they make a little bit of noise, and where you have neighbors who become sensitive to it, it becomes a very difficult environment to work with. So you do have to look at the space you're going into. Is it workable? Can you see yourself, is it sustainable that a short-term let is going to work effectively in that space? I declined it. Unfortunately, I really wanted to make it work, but sometimes you got to find the spaces that work for it. Even the beautiful spaces, you got to decline, because it's just going to bring you problems later on. And that's when you talk about, I spoke earlier about professional hosts. There's no accreditation really in the space, and Airbnb gives you the tag of super host, etc. But if you want to be a professional host, if you want to build a business in a space where you see that it's going to be sustainable. You're going to be there for the next 2 to 3 to 5 years if you're doing the rent to rent. If you're buying into a place, even more so. But it's about putting your business and running your business in the right spaces, and then managing those tenants. Those guests, sorry. You can always review the guests. That's after the fact. And that's where Airbnb is really helpful, that you can review the guests. Other platforms like Booking.com don't allow you to review the guests very, very effectively. So that's where those platforms also come into question.
Oh, good. So you're reviewing each other, which is good. So I've got a question on reviews. Yes, sorry, you were going to say.
No, it keeps us both honest. Airbnb keeps us both honest.
I like that. So, how do we encourage people to give reviews? I find people often don't give reviews so easily unless negative and they want to make a point. Robin?
So that is true. That is the general trend out there, and that is what is our starting point. Because if we understand why they may be resisting reviews and how to make sure that we're not asking them for something that they feel they've been bribed or manipulated into, then we're going to have challenges. So if we can figure those solutions out, we're going to get them to review us. And again, all of these tips and tricks are in our courses. So please go and look at those so that you can actually figure that out. But here is what we do. Obviously, first and foremost, the better your place is, the better kept it is, better clean it is, the better your communication is, the less they're going to have to complain about. So number one is make sure you've got your fundamentals in place. Number two, you can inquire during their stay if everything is in place and fine, so that they don't leave that comment to you right at the end in a public review. So you can be asking them, hey, if you have any questions or queries or something doesn't work or doesn't look or feel right, let us know so that we can sort it out right away. You could send that automatically to them on the first night that they check in, which means you're able to respond to it straight away, and it's not something they can leave as a bad review down the line. Then when they exit, what I have found most important is I want to create an experience for them where they're on the same team as I am. And how I look at that is I don't go and say, hi, I would really appreciate a 5-star review because it's better, it helps us stay ahead of our competition, or it's, this is a hard job and we all do our best. Because that makes it look like I'm trying to be a bit like a second car salesman trying to squeeze something out of them. What I share is one of the greatest trends, well, not the greatest, but the trends that we see on Airbnb at the moment are scammers, that people are listing places, getting money, and then there actually is no real place. So I write my review that also says, we appreciate your review, and I'll tell you why, that with the current experience that there are some fake listings out there, we're wanting to make sure that any traveler or guest looking to stay at our place knows that this is a legit and trustworthy place. So please do leave us a review so that others can also trust your words and not just ours. So along that line, and it makes people feel like, okay, that is legit, that's true. I don't want people to get a fake listing, so I will also give you a review so that another guest can have the same experience as they did to us. And in that, I'll also say, and if you have any points of improvement that we could do, please let us know in the private messaging, and that's what we'll share with them so that they can then put their complaint in a private message as opposed to a public message. And it's worked fantastically. Like I said, we get 19 out of 21 positive reviews. They are positive. We've got incredibly high ratings, but the response is really good, and that's what I think is important.
Wonderful. I think nicely put. I can't believe where the time disappeared, but we've got 2 more questions. So what I'm going to I'm not going to ask you to comment on that one, Miguel. I'm rather going to ask you, can you talk about linen? Do you suggest washing it every day, giving them new linen, even if a person has booked a unit for a month? Yours.
Sure. So, but this is the thing is
dirty linen, dirty linen.
the stories that have come out. I can tell you some stories. But honestly, I think there's a book in it. If we had to get a few hosts together, and some of the stories that can come out, it's really interesting, right? But this is where it gets real. Is that it is about linen. It's about how to get stains out of linen. It's about what type of linen, the thread counts. But it's also about kind of what's practical. So, we had this conversation in our group actually earlier this week. Should I go for white linen or can I get a nice colorful linen? Well, you can't, the more times you wash colorful linen, the more faded it looks, and you're going to be discarding that very soon because you're going to be getting bad reviews because you're using old linen. So, white's the way to go. And you know what? So 90% of stains come out with the usual washing detergents. You've got to do a bit of research. You've got to get the right people in. My staff, I don't know about how to wash linen myself and how to get stains out. I've got staff who really do a great job. But it comes down to those practicalities. other than putting the listing out, taking lovely photos and doing that, it's about the practicalities. Does the linen feel good when I sleep in it? At the end of the day, we've got a guest sleeping on that pillow. What is it? I've had guests say, I stayed here 3 months ago, and they were staying in an apartment actually next door. The pillows are different. I want the pillows I had 3 months ago. And I've since then realized I need to get a consistent type of pillow in, and it's not about going all crazy on those, but it's about consistency. It's about having certain standards. It's about how to maintain the standards. It's the operational side of this business is what makes it successful. The photos and the listing, you did once off, it's great. You update those every so often, but the operationals, what you do every day, whether you do it every day or once a week, that's what we discuss. And really, the answer is it depends on the expectation you created with your guest. So yeah, and I guess it's about getting into communities where these are happening, and then making decisions from there.
Okay, so for your monthly renter, you're not going to change his linen every day.
Well, I'll tell you what I do. I do. I should have changed it in once a week, and then I do a midweek, what I call a mid-service, where the housekeeping team goes in, they make the beds, they do change the towels, they clean the apartment, do the dishes, etc. But we do a linen change once a week. So and that'll happen every week for that month, for example.
Okay, great. Okay, so Robin, I'm going to move on to something else, the last question, and then we can do a bit of a wrap up. So Robin, how do you create customer loyalty with the Airbnb industry?
Yeah, so let's see if we can actually just unpack that, because are we talking about loyalty that Airbnb, that they see us and they want to be loyal to us and we're loyal to them, or we're talking about our guests coming back again and again and that kind of loyalty? So I think let's take the first one. The first one is at this kind of scale and what we're doing, I don't think anyone's going to do us any favors. It's not like Airbnb is going to say, oh, you've got your 10 units, so great. When they're dealing with millions of units around the world, where some people have got 600 units, and who are we that are coming up with the 10s and the 20s or even just the 5s? So I think this is all about understanding the fundamentals. They're a business, we're a business. If we can get guests to come to our place, Airbnb generates income because that's their business model. So they're going to keep promoting our units if we are providing a good service. So they will start saying, oh, Robin's place is one of the top 1% of homes in the whole world, which is what I have in some of my units. You have things like guest favorites, all these little tags that Airbnb puts on your listing. I can't do it myself, but Airbnb puts those little tags in my listing that give that sense of this is one of the Airbnb favorites. And that will give us some sense of, I think, security and surety to the guests that this is a legit listing and is successful. So that's the one thing. The other one about loyalty from our guests would also depend on your model. Miguel has a significant amount of returner guests because they're coming back for work or for whatever their reason is. I actually don't have a lot of return guests because many of them are overseas. Many of them are specifically coming for a more special holiday, and it's not something they can just keep doing again and again. Of course, they say they would like to, but that's not my targeted avatar as such of who I'm getting. But there are ways to get them to come back, which would be, you can also have your own booking website, which these channel managers create for you for free. They can actually create it so that people can come directly to you. But I usually keep my loyalty to the platforms out there because I want my global guests to see my units first and foremost. So I think maybe if I actually just sum it up, Neil, and say, if we rely on loyalty to make our business successful, then you're doing the wrong thing. You should be able to do this with a cold investor or a cold guest, someone who doesn't know your place, has never even been to Cape Town. We have guests who kind of say, what is load shedding? We've never experienced load shedding before. And you say, no load shedding. Like, what is that? So these are the guests that you're wanting, or not wanting, but it requires no loyalty because I'm still going to be booked up even with the first time guest. And if you get that right, then the returning guests are a bonus to you.
Great stuff. I think thanks for clarifying that point. You clarified it very well. Miguel, last question, and then I'm going to get to a wrap up with Robin and yourself. And Robin, at the end, you can also give, information about your course and that kind of stuff. So there's been a few queries there. So Miguel, let's talk a little bit about unique challenges or regulations specific to South Africa with potential Airbnb investors that they should be aware of and the impact thereof.
Sure. So this is this is a real challenge coming down the line, which I'd say 95% of hosts don't know about. So we've seen in London, you can only let out your Airbnb or short-term rental, not just Airbnb, across all platforms, I think for a max of 90 days. Paris, 120 days. Airbnb here, or short-term rentals, has been banned in New York City unless someone is sleeping in a room in your apartment. It's been limited significantly. It's been banned it's to be banned in Barcelona in the next 4 years, etc., etc. It's happening all over the world. In South Africa, the government put out a green paper earlier this year, which talks to regulating the short-term rental industry utilizing these e-platforms, and it refers to these night limits around the world. So you can see where government and the Department of Tourism is thinking. But don't disagree with it. It's good. This industry is unregulated. It's kind of all over the place at the moment. A bit of regulation and professionalism would not hurt the industry, and that host who's doing their Airbnb in the right manner. But to ensure that government doesn't kind of go down the wrong track, we've formed a task team calling ourselves the South African Short-Term Rental Association. It's we're forming it. It will launch in the next 8 weeks. We've got some of the larger OTAs, including Airbnb, working with us in terms of thinking and putting a position out there as to what we think government should think about when they're putting this regulation together. Currently, we represent in total about 3,000 listings. It's a relatively small group, but representing quite a lot of listings, and looking forward to, as we come out to market, getting more hosts close to that and signed up and supporting that, so that when government, the next step will be to come up with a white paper before they go to make it law. By the time they get to that point, we want to be able to go back to government with a unified voice to actually say, please don't do anything that will significantly harm this market. It's not just the hosts that are impacted. It's the teams that work in those spaces. It's the suppliers that work around those spaces, and even ultimately the guests who, without the opportunity to use a short-term rental, to use an Airbnb, the other options don't always suit their needs. So there is a comprehensive view that's required, and we're looking to put that together, get support from the markets, and take that to government as they think about what regulation could look like. And we'd like to propose what that could look like. Some Airbnbs are run in a very it's good to have a fire extinguisher in an Airbnb. The other day I had a guest slip in the shower in my Airbnb. Thankfully, I provided them with details on where to go to in terms of the local emergency center, the local hospital. So those kind of simple things, which are often not thought about, those are the kind of things we need to have available and for our guests. So that's what you're looking at, working on that. And really, if there are hosts out there, I'd like to leave my number as well, also for that WhatsApp group. If there are hosts out there who'd like to learn more about this, please get in touch. And we're just creating a mailing list just to keep everyone on the same page as to where that goes to.
Wonderful. Okay, great. I think a good way. Can you believe it, guys? We've actually run out of time. I don't know where the time's gone to. It's just disappeared. Robin, I see you did post your course details up there. Thanks very much. I'm going to ask you just to give a 1-minute wrap. We've only lost 3 people since 1 o'clock, which is not bad. So people still listening to us. They haven't run away yet. We have gone a little bit over time, but it's a great topic, and I think it deserves to go over a little bit of time. So maybe, Robin, you give a 1 minute wrap, your final thoughts, parting shots to everybody, and then I'm going to ask for you exactly the same then, Miguel.
I think that every investor out there can find one of the Airbnb strategies that will work for them. And that is the beautiful thing about Airbnb. Rent to rent, buying to rent on Airbnb, scaling this up as an independent business, doing a whole lot of things, even if it's just living somewhere different or decreasing your rent in the current place that you've got. There's just so many options available to us. And I think it's a bit like what we see going on around the world. There are certain disruptors out there, and Airbnb and Uber came in and Netflix and Spotify all disrupted the tradition. And I think what we're looking at here is that kind of model. There's a disruption that opens up investing in its variations to many different types of people. And I think South Africa is great. We already know tourism is good. We already know that property values here are worthwhile getting into. And I think this adds just that extra flavor. And of course, it's so much easier to start, get going, and to profit. I keep coming back to that. I love your phrase of unlocking profit. It's not like digging for profit and sweating for profit. It's there. You just have to unlock it and it comes out. And I think that's the image I have of the Airbnb model. And it's all about just getting going. We have people who do the course in 1 weekend from start to finish, and a week later they have their first unit. It's like you can't do that if in traditional investing. You wouldn't dare to do that because you're not going to put 6 million rand into a house or some apartment and hope that it's going to work. But this suddenly opens up so many possibilities. So I would definitely suggest people just go in there, they browse through this, look at it, just watch my first presentation, which I think is liveforfree.co.za. That's my story, live for free. And I just, show with you what was, potentially could be there for you. And that's a good start.
Wonderful. Great stuff. Thanks for being on the show once again, Robin. And I encourage everybody to reach out to him to do his courses. Don't do it alone. It's probably not a good idea because I think that's the problem with a lot of people do. They think, no ways, I don't need this guy. I know what you need to know.
Yeah.
We've only just discussed some of this stuff. We haven't even really got to the depth of this. And, there's a lot of technicalities we've left out here. So I encourage everybody to get involved, but also to get educated. So, Miguel, your final thoughts, please.
Closing comments. So I put my details on the chat there. Please drop me a WhatsApp, and I can share the WhatsApp groups and the various Facebook groups that we're involved. It's good to keep in touch and to engage. Often speaking to Airbnb hosts, they're doing this by themselves. They might have got onto a YouTube channel. They might have read a book. There aren't too many books out there. They're more US based. But really, it's so helpful to get onto a group of other Airbnb hosts going through it. I think so. Airbnb and bandwagon, or I think, or what I'd like to say, it's flavor of the month at the moment, and it's super exciting. There is money to be made. It's the barriers to entry are quite low. You need a lot to get into. We've spoken about all that, right? But get into it and kind of do mediocre returns, or get into it and do some decent returns and make some decent rental income. The difference between those two is just getting education and getting the right support. As with anything else, you are starting a business, run it effectively for your own purposes. And often people look at the investment in time or money, and really, if they look back at it, it's in some cases two or three nights of additional bookings, and you'll pay for the investment. Sometimes it's a bit more, but you get what you pay for. So reach out. Robin and myself, we make ourselves available for these conversations. We had InvestorCon last week where we had, I think, 80 different people join our Airbnb class over 2 nights in Sandton. A lot of good feedback. Going deep, and all those speakers there, they're happy to share. So
Awesome.
It's out there. Reach out.
Great stuff. No, awesome. So once again, I'd just like to thank both Robin and Miguel. I think it's been a great chat. I think there's a book out there. You mentioned there's an American book. We need a South African book. It's time to do things the South African way. Yes, I think between Robin and yourself, and I'll even jump in there to help you guys publish there, so we can do that. And it's really awesome. It's wonderful. It's a great discussion. I think it's something that we've got to do again in the future. I encourage you to obviously do the courses, along with Robin. And I can see a lot of you have been very patient. You stayed on the show. So thank you for that. And then just before we close, because we have run over time, there is our webinar next week, next Thursday, same time, 12 o'clock to 1 o'clock. We're talking about the power of short-term property capital investment versus traditional buy-to-let. We also got a big debate on that topic. To register, there is a link there that is in the group. Otherwise, you just go to the rei.co.za website. And to our audience, really appreciate your active participation with some really good questions, good engagement throughout this. We're going to do this again. And we hope that you've gained valuable knowledge. I think we've got two very good leaders in this field over here, and encourage you to reach out to them. But also, if you reach out to us, info@rei.co.za, I will certainly put you in touch if you're looking for info. In particular, Miguel has put his number up there, and of course, Robin has put his course details on there. So until next time, stay informed, stay proactive. May your ventures in the world of real estate be fruitful and fulfilling. Take care and goodbye until next Thursday. This is Neil Peterson along with Miguel Martins and also Robin Booth. We're signing out. Until next time, thank you guys. Till next week.
Thanks, Neil. Have a good time. Thanks, everyone.